We're back from recess. It appears we now have a quorum. So we will begin where we left off yesterday. We were on the second reading, and we are now on bill number 233-37 LS. This is a bill sponsored by Senator Kanata. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Jen Manana Sidzus, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I may, I'll just move bill number 233-37 LS and just set it aside for right now, if that's okay with the body.
Is there any objection to setting the bill aside? Seeing no objection, that motion carries.
Okay, Manana Sidzus, colleagues, at this time, next on the agenda is 242-37 COR. That is authored by Speaker Therese Amterlai. I will recognize you at this time. Good morning.
Good morning, buenas, colleagues. I'd like to make a motion to place bill number 242-37 COR as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture to the third reading. This is a bill sponsored by myself, Therese Amterlahi. It is an act to amend sections 21101, 21102, 21104, 21107, and 21115 of Chapter 21, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to sanitary permit requirements. I'd like to speak on that motion.
Yes, Speaker, you may proceed at this time.
So bill number 242 was introduced on February 13. This was and referred to our committee. It was a bill introduced at the request of the Department of Public Health, and more specifically, the Division of Environmental Health. This is to tackle updating of the inspection requirements found in Chapter 21 of Title 10, Guam Code Annotated. The proposed amendments included authorizing the Department of Public Health and Social Services to prioritize sanitary permits based on health assessments or risk posed to the public. It also allows a director to appoint a designee for inspections and issuance of notices of violation to make the process more efficient. And it establishes a time period for all demerits to be corrected, whereas previously there was an exemption. It also ensures that the Alcohol Beverage Control Board, or the ABC Board, is the one who enforces and controls those licenses for ABC establishments, as opposed to what the statute currently says is the Department of Public Health and Social Services. So this bill removes that authority from the Department of Public Health and leaves it squarely with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. During the hearing, Francine Solis she was present on behalf of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. So was the acting director, or she read the testimony by the acting director, Peter John Camacho. And they stated in that, quote, it had been several years since the laws governing the Division of Environmental Health Operations have been updated, and there have been changes in the regulatory activities that need to be reflected in these statutes, creating more alignment with the law and with their practice. And it was also revealed during that hearing that the public health is mandated by law currently to inspect all establishments quarterly. And so based on the current mandates, and there are 3,000 permitted establishments, that would be 12,000 inspections a year based on the current mandates. With a risk-based assessment approach to inspection, inspection will be prioritized based on risk, and as opposed to the quarterly inspections for every single establishment. So our current law, just to be more specific for those who don't have the bill in front of them, the current law mandates sanitary permits for all eating and drinking establishments, for all food establishments, including mobile food, temporary food services, vending machines. It requires a sanitary permit for institutional facilities, hotels, cosmetic establishments, public laundry or dry cleaning establishments, public swimming pools, and mortuaries. So all of these would still be subject to sanitary requirements. It's just that quarterly mandate will be replaced with a based on risk mandate of inspection. The current exemptions to a sanitary permit include any market, wayside stand, or roadside stand used exclusively for the sale of fresh, unprocessed fruits, vegetables, and nuts, eggs, live poultry, live pigs, other live animals except dogs and cats, and other animals stipulated by the director that are by the original producer thereof in his own property, or liquor, or canned or bottled soft drinks. So the current exemptions would still remain, and this would just create a priority of, or allow them to create a priority of which establishments will be inspected. So I ask my colleagues for their support on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the main motion, does anyone else wish to speak on this measure? On the main motion? If not, Senator San Augustine, I will recognize you this morning. Good morning, Mananasidus.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I have just a few questions to the author, just for clarification.
Please state your question.
Okay, I will. On page 2, or yeah, it'll be page 2, line 10. That would be my first question. Why did we strike out any food establishment as defined in Chapter 24 to operate a business? Why did we strike that out when the line 9 says in Chapter 23 or Chapter 24? I'm just trying to understand, why would you strike something else when you're going to refer it back to that? That'd be the first question.
Let me go ahead and ask, Madam Speaker, would you like to yield?
Yes, I'd like to yield to that. Thank you. That's a good question. I asked the same thing because I received this particular language from the Department of Public Health. And it sounds like they're trying not to make any actual effect by these changes, but by putting chapters 23 and 24 in the same line, it's because in the future they intend to combine those two chapters. They're both regarding food establishments. One says food establishment, one says eating and drinking establishment. So I think they're eventually going to combine those two. And they just, while we were doing these changes, they were going to just combine that in one line of the statute. It's really all.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator San Augustine, does that satisfy the inquiry?
That pretty much, it's just amazing how Public Health is looking at merging them. They should have just done it one time.
Yeah.
Because this bill is supposed to, it almost looks like this bill is going to capture it. And it seems that it's not. It's like, it's a good bill, but Public Health, not a very good grade for me, coming from that perspective. On the other question I had was, being formally from Revenue and Tax with the compliance branch and with a couple of my colleagues here that were enforcement, when we go to, I guess, I'm trying to figure out which page this is. It deals with the automatic suspension of alcohol beverage license and business license. The author, I have to question this, is to strike out everything on 19 to line 19 to line 25. Number one, we need to understand that number one, when it deals with revenue and tax, before you can get a business license, you got to make sure you got a green light from Public Health. And in order to operate any business on Guam, you can go to Public Health all you want. If you never get a license from revenue and tax, you can't open the business. And then the areas that were striked, and ultimately maybe clarify that you took out the The automatic suspension, I give you good examples that when we go out, when I was there, when we go out and inspect businesses, and we find that their ABC license may be intact. When I say maybe, because if we see that the sanitary permit is not up to date, then immediately that night we'll call them. We'll call public health and say, hey, you got somebody here that don't have an updated permit. Where you stand on it? It says, and if they say we're going to get to them tomorrow, or they give us a date, then we kind of like ease off. But at the same token, there are laws that govern our inspection that is almost identical to public health. A good example is hot water, running hot water. When we go into bars, if you don't have running hot water, we could take your license away. There's a bunch of other stuff deals with the temperature of the products that are in there, the alcohol beverages and whatever they're selling. And the compliance branch can technically shut them down. And it wouldn't matter what public health will say. We'll just say no. We'll grab the chains and we put it on the doors and we'll lock them up. But with this part here, I'm just wondering if the author would like to still maintain striking it, that it's only just to inform the director. It's an obligation and a responsibility of the Department of Revenue and Tax when we find a problem to inform the Department of Public Health that they need to jump on it. A very good example is we found on other establishments, they didn't have a current business license, they didn't have a permit. We closed them and we said, you need to come down now before we lock the doors so you can do your citation. Because we issue a separate, there's two different citations that are given. Okay, so, and there's multiple violations of law that revenue and tax gets involved. And I'm just concerned that you want to strike out appropriate enforcement action. Any alcohol beverage license previously issued to the permit holder with respect to the same shall be thereby. See, it has it where it's automatically suspended. And I don't know if the intent of the author was to avoid that. And even if it's coming from public health, if they gave that comment, I'd have to question Francine because she used to work at Revenue and Tax. You don't take away any of the authority that exists. And maybe the author can explain that, because I would have a problem then with the bill if that's to maintain the strike.
So, Senator, you're on page 6 and 7 of the bill. Am I saying that correctly?
If it's correct, yeah, in section 21115, automatic suspension of alcohol beverage license and business
Colleagues,
license.
I hope you got all of that. And I'm going to yield to Speaker Therese. Would you like to answer that inquiry, please?
Yes, Jesus
Thank you.
Masi to the inquirer, Senator. Yes, that is the intent of the bill. It's to make sure that in this public health statute, we're only talking about sanitary permits. And whether that ABC business has a license, an ABC license, a business license or not, it's not going to be at all controlled by public health. So they're already mandated, as the previous speaker said, by other statutes, when Rev and Tax will be able to shut them down, deny them a license. All of that is mandated somewhere else. So we're making sure we don't repeat it anywhere in this public health statute, because we don't want them to be contradictory sometime. So we just taking that out, leaving the language that only applies to sanitary permits. So now it says that the Director of Public Health will notify Rev and Tax if they have suspended or revoked a sanitary permit. That's it. That's all public health is going to do. The rest is all within the jurisdiction of Rev and Tax where it belongs. That's what this amendment is trying to make clear by deleting that other language instead of, mandating it here that it's automatically suspended. All of that is up to Rev and Tax and the board.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Senator, does that suffice?
Yes, it does, Madam Speaker, and I thank the author for explaining that, so that the people of Guam that are in business understand that if Revenue and Tax finds you and Public Health comes in with a sanitary permit, you're out of business. And thank you, author, and I do support now the bill itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. On the main motion, if no one else wishes to speak, Senator Chris Barnett, good morning. You are recognized at this time.
Madam, and good morning to the people of Guam. Thank you for watching. I too had a question for the good author from Jotner Rules, if she should so yield. And my question is relative to the new section 2104, which reads, notwithstanding any other provision of law, the director or his designee shall inspect an establishment or activity subject to this chapter at a frequency based upon the policy adopted by him or her that takes into consideration its existing resources and the health risk the establishments pose to the public, such as the number and type of people served, potential for disease transmission and injuries, and history of non-compliance. And I guess my question is, as the body had just passed and the governor has subsequently signed into law a measure that was supported by the body that deals with the expiration date of sanitary permits issued to be on the anniversary of their date of issuance. And in the public hearing, it was indicated by representatives from the Department of Public Health and Social Services that they would, quote unquote, prioritize the inspection of schools ahead of other establishments. And so I guess my question to the author is, how would this bill, if passed, affect the timeline for the inspection of public schools and other educational institutions, as this school year, I don't need to remind the body, every learning establishment must comply with the public health, school safety, and sanitation guidelines.
Thank you very much, Senator Barnett. Speaker Therese, would you like to answer that inquiry, please?
Yes, I would, and that's a good question. It's been mandated by a separate statute, a separate law, that public school inspections will be annually. And I think we've amended that to be renewed at the date of inspection annually. So this will not affect that other law, and this is for food establishments. So this actually might affect cafeterias, however.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Senator Chris, does that suffice your inquiry?
It sure does, Madam. Sidos Masi, and nothing further.
Thank you very much. Anybody else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Therese, I will allow you to close at this time.
All right. I'd just like to renew my motion to place the bill on third as amended, and to thank my colleagues for their support of this measure. Oh, if you gave me 1 minute. That's it. Jesus Masi.
On the motion then, Madam Speaker, to put on the third reading. On the motion, are there any objections to place bill number 242-37 into the third reading voting file? (242-37) COR. Hearing or seeing no objections, motion carries. Colleagues, we are now on resolution resolution number 171-37 LS, is introduced by Speaker Therese M. Terlai. Speaker, you have the floor at this time. You may proceed on that, on the motion.
They're passing out right now a substituted on the floor version of this resolution. So I'd like to make a motion to accept resolution number 171-37 LS as amended by the author and substituted on the floor.
Can you read the title, ma'am?
Sure. And so this is a resolution relative to expressing the support of Imene 37 na Legislature in Guam for amendment of the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act to include the people of Guam as downwinders of U.S. Pacific nuclear test sites, extend the claims period, and improve compensation and benefits.
As introduced by Madam Speaker.
This is introduced by myself, Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chris Barnett, Joanne Brown, Frank Blas Jr., Jesse A. Lujan, Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Matt L. Shelton, Dwayne, excuse me, Dwayne T.D. St. Nicholas, and Joe S. and Augustine.
On the motion to accept the substituted version, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, Motion carries. Speaker Talai, you are recognized.
Sizus Masi. This is, for everyone who's listening, this is commonly known as the RECA,
Yeah.
Radiation Exposure Compensation Act.
And if we can move it to the third reading.
Yes,
now.
resolution by the Guam Legislature. So I'd like to make a motion that we move this resolution to the third reading for voting, and I'd like to speak on that motion.
Most definitely, Speaker. You may proceed.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. I move to place this resolution on third. This is, again, going to express the sentiments of the Guam Legislature and the people of Guam to Congress. So the intent is that this resolution will be sent to Congress formally and hopefully considered in their deliberations of amendments to RECA. Guam in this resolution is asking that it be included under the current Congressional Radiation Exposure Compensation Law, which is compensating those who have been exposed to radiation in nuclear testing, uranium mining across the United States. Guam wants to be included as what's called a downwinder, meaning Guam has basis to believe that it was literally downwind of the 67 nuclear tests that took place in the Bikini and Enewetak atolls on the Republic of the Marshall Islands between the years of 1946 and 1962. These nuclear test sites in the Marshall Islands, in addition to other locations in the Pacific Ocean, became known as, quote, the Pacific Proving Grounds, unquote. In 1952, one nuclear test titled Operation Ivy was conducted on Elugalab Island in the Enewetak Atoll, in which the first true thermonuclear hydrogen bomb, a 10.4 megaton device, code-named Mike, was detonated, destroying the entire island and leaving behind a crater 6,240 feet across and 164 feet deep in the aftermath. In 2004, the National Academies of Science recommended that Guam be included under RECA as downwinders. That's based, and it's published in a 2005 assessment of the scientific information for the Radiation Exposure Screening and Education Program, reported by the National Research Council on behalf of the Committee to Assess the Scientific Information for Radiation Exposure Screening and Education Program, and on Radiation Effects Research Division on Earth and Life Studies. It was confirmed that Guam, quote, did receive radioactive debris from fallout during the nuclear weapons testing in the Pacific Ocean, unquote, and was a harbor for the decontamination of ships present in the Marshall Islands during the nuclear testing. This resolution urges Congress to expand the designated area under its current law to include Guam, to make more individuals eligible, and to increase the amount of compensation, which is currently set at $50,000 to $150,000. We are urging Congress to provide medical benefits for the claimants, including screening. We are urging that this bill, or that Congress cover all those who were present on Guam between 1946 and 1962, which coincides with the dates of testing, of the nuclear testing. Many of us have seen resolutions like this over the years. This has been something Guam has been advocating for many years, and I will speak about that in detail in a little while, but it all really began for Guam when Robert Celestial discovered unclassified documents in the 90s that had been previously classified. And he was looking for something else in regards to his own personal claims. And when he discovered that Guam may have been exposed as a downwind of these nuclear tests. Mr. Celestial was able to garner, after much research on his own personal, in his own personal capacity, he was able to garner the assistance of former senators Angel Santos, Carmen Fernandez, Mark Forbes, to execute the legislature's Blue Ribbon Panel Committee, composed of Mr. Celestial and 11 other citizens of Guam, and it was chaired by Dr. Chris Perez. This Blue Ribbon Panel was appointed by Speaker Tony Anpinco and conducted research and adopted findings on Guam's exposure to radiation, resulting in a 97-page report edited by Mr. Will Castro, also a former senator, and Mr. Sean Briscoe. One of the things that Mr. Celestial has been able to provide to Congress, based on his research and his efforts to literally track down the person who was on Guam monitoring the Geiger counter at that time. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. But he found him, and he got him to sign a written declaration about what had happened. And at first, Mr. Celestial testified that at first he was very hesitant to say anything, because he had been instructed that this was classified and no one was to know what he experienced in Guam. This was U.S. Navy Lieutenant Bert Schreiber. Mr. Schreiber testified that when he was here, he witnessed the counter move on a certain day, and that, I guess in his words, it was described as being off the charts, just out of control. He thought it was broken, but they tried it again. And so it was Mr. Schreiber's testimony that was very instrumental as well in convincing many members of Congress at this point that Guam should be included under RICA. I want to thank Mr. Celestial, because I went back and I looked at all the resolutions that the legislature had done. And some of us had witnessed this experience of his, how he comes and tries to tell people, we've been exposed to radiation. Not many people believed him at first. And it took many efforts to get to that Blue Ribbon Panel. At first, some people he described to us not believed him, maybe mocked him. And, but he was able, one by one, to gain the ear of different senators back then, and gain the credibility of Dr. Perez and others who helped him in this petition. So this began in 2005, when the legislature started writing resolutions and sending them to Congress. It began with Mark Forbes and B.J. Cruz. That was 2005. In 2007, another resolution. Mark Forbes, Tina Muñoz Barnes, Ben Pangilinan, asking Congress again to include Guam in the jurisdiction as downwinders of radiation exposure. In 2009, another resolution sponsored by Ben Pangilinan, Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Judy Wampat, again asking Congress to include Guam in the list of affected areas with respect to which claims relating to atmospheric nuclear testing shall be allowed. In 2011, another resolution, Ben Pangilinan, Tina Rose Muñoz Barnes, Judy Wampat, to include Guam, to improve and increase compensation for those affected by ionizing radiation. In 2013, Resolution 127, Ben Pangilinan, B.J. Cruz, Tina Muñoz Barnes, Mike Nicholas. And I'd like to note that almost all of these were eventually passed unanimously by all of them, so all the senators became co-sponsors at the time. So 2013, again, another one to include Guam and to improve and increase compensation. In 2017, that's when I became a senator, and I was honored to be able to take this up with others. Myself, B.J. Cruz, Senator Tom Atta, Dennis Rodriguez, Frank Uggan, Mike Nicholas, Talina Nelson, Joe San Agustin, Regine Bisco-Lee, and eventually all other senators. Again, we've been asking for all these years, and this continued throughout my term here, so in every session 2017, since then, we've been sending to Congress our testimony in the form of resolution formally adopted by the Guam Legislature, trying to urge Congress to gain us coverage. The importance of coverage is this. Currently, RICA gives compensation, so that's one thing. So all those who make a claim, and if you're found to be within the categories, then your claim will be, you will be eligible. And the categories currently are, you have to have the certain type of illness. These include cancers, pretty much. There's a whole list of the different types of cancers that make you eligible or give that presumption that you were exposed to radiation, and so many of these cancers are prevalent here on Guam. It also gives a one-time compensation. It also allowed for screening, and so this has been proven over the years. This program is administered by the U.S. Department of Justice, and it has proven over the years to really play a difference in the lives of those people. That's why not just Mr. Celestial and Guam, but all across the nation, different counties, different towns are advocating for coverage as well, because the testing they have seen now has affected a greater area than originally proposed under RICA. Recently, I don't know if many of you know, but I would like to put this on the record formally. So Mr. Celestial, in addition to advocating with us and people of Guam, has advocated with members of Congress over many years in his individual capacity. He has joined advocacy groups. They call them their frontliners group he has, and there are others who are advocating for inclusion, and they've become very good friends over the years because of their shared goals and their shared work. And in Mr. Celestial's case, his work includes traveling back and forth to the U.S. to meet with them, to literally go to Congress and go to different offices in Congress to lobby with those senators to include Guam. I was with him on one occasion when one of the senators, and he has his own personal experience in addition to advocating for Guam. He was a soldier ordered to go and clean up that detonation, that big hole that is now on the island. And when they were ordered to clean that up, he was not told that it was radioactive. They were wearing shorts and really no protective gear. So all of this, of course, later on, much later on, was recognized to have caused his illnesses. But he has suffered all his life from some of these illnesses, and I think some of the people of Guam as well have suffered from their exposure. But despite that, he has continued over the last few years. I mean, since I went to Congress with him once because he was formally invited to testify, and so he did. And that was great because it was in front of a committee of Congress. But after that, he never stopped. He continued to, in the very early mornings, join this group in their Zoom meetings, and sometimes in these meetings, they meet with senators, representatives, and their staffs. And these are the very instrumental committees and the very instrumental senators in helping to get this. And so that's how they have gained support, credibility, and one by one, the votes, which is the most important part. So recently, I don't know if some of you've watched this, it was biggest news for Guam. The US Senate passed a standalone RICA bill. That's unheard of. So they passed a bill, S3853, 69 yeses and 30 noes. That bill now moves to the U.S. House of Representatives, and so we are looking to our representative and to all the representatives there for support. Again, I would like to, my time's up, I could go on forever, but I would like to just thank Mr. Celestial and the members of the Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors, which is a group of PARs formed by those whose family members had, or themselves had cancer, and they didn't understand why. And they joined together with Robert to learn the potential, why they might have, or all their family, or some of their family members had received cancer. And so they have helped him, and they've been behind him this whole way, beside him, and in every way assisting the people of Guam to be recognized under RICA. So I ask my colleagues' support. I know we all support this, but I just want to put on the record these things, and if you can, please help me get this to Congress, and let's be heard. Sizus Masi.
Sizus Masi, Speaker Terlahi. On the resolution number 171, Vice Speaker Barnes, you are recognized, followed by Senator Teidigui, Senator Lujan, Senator St. Nicholas, Senator Barnett.
Undanklo na Sizus Masi, Madam Speaker, and Manana Sizus Todos Hamzu. Hafle and warm greetings to my colleagues here. First of all, Madam Speaker, I literally want to extend my undanklo na Sizus Masi to Speaker Therese Terlahi for literally authorizing this very, very, very important resolution, and to my esteemed colleagues for their steadfast support to this years-long effort, and to, yes, our delegate now, Delegate James Moylan, for his continued dedication to prioritizing the needs of our people and ensuring that those who have suffered as a result of nuclear testing in the Pacific receive the benefits they rightfully deserve. And as we heard the retiring speaker, the good speaker from Jonia, literally talking about the history and sharing what has happened to date, I must say that the biggest advocate in Mr. Robert Celestial is he's never given up. We in the legislatures past and today will continue to support, but our voices still need to be heard. I stand here, Madam Speaker, to express my wholehearted support for this resolution, which places our people at the forefront, ensuring they receive compensation and benefits. Since 1990, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act has dispersed over $2.5 billion in claims to more than 39,000 claimants. Guam residents, Madam Speaker, however, have been excluded from this program so far, and that's why I want to thank the good advocate and PARS, the Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors, for literally championing this program so far. This resolution, Madam Speaker, marks a vital step toward righting this wrong. It honors the hard work and tireless efforts of individuals like Mr. Robert Celestial, who for years and years has advocated both locally and on the national stage in Washington, D.C. to correct, Madam Speaker, to correct this injustice and to have the federal government recognize the harm it imposed on many, many people through their nuclear test in Micronesia, including our island of Guam. Madam Speaker, this history and indeed the aftermath that we are still gripped with in the present is truly heartbreaking. Imagine, Madam Speaker, countless families being unaware of the dangers headed their way through the trade winds that cool us. To have to fight, to have the powerful Washington establish, admit that danger existed for us, let alone agree that they must extend the same reparations to our residents as they did for other so-called downwinders. You know, Madam Speaker, the suffering of our people affected by America's nuclear tests in the Pacific has been on the hearts and minds of those who have served in these holes. This resolution, Madam Speaker, represents a reaffirmed commitment from Guam's lawmakers to see this through, to continue the good works of Mr. Celestial and those that have passed, like the Dr. Perez and all those other members who have gone from PARS, who are a part of the Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors, and even our colleagues from previous legislatures. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, with that being said, I'm extending my full support for this resolution. And this is not just a matter of policy, Madam Speaker. It is a matter, truly a matter of standing up for what is right. And I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to rise in support of this measure, of this resolution. I want to thank my colleagues and pray that we all unanimously support this resolution, because it is the right thing to do for our people, and that we shall never, never give up. Undanklo na si Diyos masi, sen sana masi. Si Diyos ang benedisi.
Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker. Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker. I'm going to try and do this without choking up here, but in 2009, when I was in the 30th Guam Legislature, one of my greatest idols in the legislature was Senator Ben Pangilinan. And I was just a rookie at that time, in 2009. And that was the first time he introduced legislation. It was Resolution 62-30. And at that time, I didn't even realize, the effects, and wasn't really, as a rookie, I was learning about everything else, how public works, how Guam, public health works, and everything that we have to learn as senators. You're a jack of all trades. And I was listening to this, and I thought, okay, well, I'll support it, and that was it. Then as time went on, I discovered I had cancer. And it was one of the cancers that was mentioned that would be covered in this. And then I found out that many more other people had this issue on Guam, because once you have this and you meet the other people who have the similar illnesses as you do. And they're all around my age. And I looked at the time frame on this, and I thought, wow, my father was stationed at Andersen Air Force Base in 1960. And we were there until all the way to 1963 before he was stationed out. And I remember playing in the yard when I got older, 3 years old. I was playing with my sisters. And And I thought to myself, well, was it that time? Is that the reason why I get it? I got it. Why didn't my sisters get it as well? But cancer, it's a trigger in the human body. Not everybody gets it, but we all have cancer cells. And it's certain things, certain elements, like smoking, for instance, asbestos, for instance, that triggers your body and activates cancer cells. And for me, it was thyroid, which is one of the causes that you can get from radiation. So when Speaker Terlahi continued this fight, continued to carry the torch, I was so grateful. And now, in the 35th Guam Legislature, when she introduced the legislation, it was resolution 94-35, I stood so behind it. I was like, I really understand what people are going through. I really understand the trials and tribulations. I understand that some people have to sell their homes in order to cover these expenses, that their family members have to give up so many their dreams so they can take care of you. And it kind of makes you angry, that the US didn't think about this when they started testing nuclear bombs in areas close to humans, or their residentials and areas. This is not just Guam, but also New Mexico, Colorado. These are some of the other states that are fighting for these injustices. No amount of money is going to take away what happened to us. It would help cover our medical costs because it's exorbitant medical cost. So there are still many of us that are still alive, and many of us who passed away from these exposures. And it's so sad because they could have really used the help when they found out they got sick. But let's not give up. Let's keep fighting for this. Because those who are still alive, they need that support, whether the money is there or not. Because it does mentally affect you sometimes, It's just the support of this body to stand behind this resolution, the support of Guam to stand behind this resolution, says so much about how we care. We care for those people who had to deal with it. We care for the families who took care of those who've already passed on because of the disease of cancer. We care, and we remember. We will remember them, and we will continue to fight for them, and continue to pray for those who were born during that time in 1950, I think in 1958 to 1962, and hope to God that those cancer cells that we all carry in our body are not triggered. So I ask my colleagues, whether it's an election year, right? And if you're here next term, let's continue the fight. And if there's anything we can do for the Pacific Radiation Group or Robert Celestial that we can do in this body to help him, then we should do that. It's very unfortunate that such a beautiful island like Guam is dealing with something like this. So I stand in full support, and I'd like my name on this too as well. I'm surprised I had my name on the last two. I don't know why I didn't get one in, but I asked the good author if they can include me in this. I greatly appreciate it. So let's keep the fight up, people. Let's keep that fight going. Thank you.
On the resolution, Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support, of course, of Resolution 17137 LS. You know, as mentioned by the good author, our Speaker, Therese Terlahi, this is just the latest of resolutions regarding the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. Likewise, we passed a resolution on November 1st for the Agent Orange situation as well. Likewise, Agent Orange, the one we passed in November, is just the latest of resolutions that was passed by the legislature and previous legislatures. Madam Speaker, you know, these are substantive resolutions. It's not just resolutions of congratulatory situations and we hand them out and photo ops and all that. These are substantive resolutions that have public hearings where the public comes out and testifies in favor or not of the issues at hand. And then we bring it to the floor and deliberate it as well, make changes if there are any. And we vote on it, and it's passed, and it's forwarded to all those named. Again, there's some new names because Congress changes every 2 years. What hasn't changed is our plight and our situation and our cause. And I remember even back in the 27th, and even before then, but my first stint in the legislature back in the 27th, we passed a resolution as well. I mean, for Radiation Compensation Act. It was led by, of course, Mr. Celestial. And so here we are 10 legislatures later, and we're still at it as well. The point I'm trying to get to, Madam Speaker, is this. We're a body of 15 in here. We're both Democrats and Republicans. There is a presidential election coming up. The Republicans just had their convention this last Saturday. I'm sure the Democrats will be having theirs as well. My suggestion is that both parties make this top issues that they can give to, that they can bring to their conventions and have it a part of their candidate's presidential platform. It brought to the forefront. Have it be major issues. Because these findings, I mean, this resolution here, and likewise the Agent Orange resolution, these have been researched, not just on our research here and Mr. Celestial's and research done by Guam, but also research done by the federal government. Acknowledging the fact that we are affected. Our resolution that we passed in November 1st for Agent Orange admitted the fact, and it included veterans, military personnel that were stationed here for the 22-year period that Agent Orange was on Guam. And it was put into the PACT Act that was passed. They identified that. And that identification included, again, military personnel that were here on Guam. But not only that, I mean, there were personnel that were working for the military or around military installations where these toxic agents were located and housed. We had numerous people come out and testify for that. So, again, as we vote on this, and I'm sure this will get 15 votes, for sure. That's like the Agent Orange did. So I'm asking again that the parties, the Democrat and Republican, to please have these as part of, again, the platform for your presidential campaigns, presidential candidates. And likewise, we have 5 candidates now vying for Washington, D.C. Please make this a major component of your campaigns. Because it's substantive, and it's, again, something that not only ourselves have recognized on our research, but also research that the federal government has done. And then acknowledge as fact that we are affected. But it only goes to that point, affected, but zero compensation. It is a fight. And as much as we get closer to, I mean, when we get news about, oh, okay, well, it's passing the PACT Act, and oh, this, and then we get the notice that, oh, but Guam wasn't included. Although it's included in the findings that we were affected, the compensation is not included for us. So, again, as our resolutions stack up in the halls of the U.S. Congress, I'm sure we have our own files over there. I ask again that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, please have these issues, these Guam issues, be included in Guam's platform to present to your presidential nominees as a major issue for the campaigns, most especially for Guam. We're going to be visited, I'm sure, by their proxies, and they're going to tell us how important we are. But then, after the importance, we have legislature after legislature introducing resolutions that, again, just stack up. We must continue the fight, but the fight has to be even louder than just our resolutions here. The fight has to be a major component to presidential campaigns and candidates to Congress representing Guam. With that being said, Madam Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you, Speaker Terlahi, again for introducing the resolution. I've got a couple of resolutions I'll put on the next session as well. And again, hope it, maybe in Congress we have our own, maybe not file anymore, but maybe our own room for resolutions. But with that, again, thank you very much, and I stand in full support, and I'm sure this will get a 15-0 support from this body. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. Senator Sid Nicholas, followed by Senator Barnett.
Yay, it's my turn. Good morning, Madam Speaker, and good morning, everybody in Guam. Every once in a while, it's nice to reaffirm the love for your country. As the speaker was speaking, she mentioned that a lot of the stuff that came to light were because of declassified information. What country in the world does that? Who publishes their misdeeds after many years have gone by? Only the United States. It's amazing. fairly new to the game, and I didn't quite realize, who that person is that's always smiling at us when he's sitting at public hearings. Found out it's Robert Celestial. And I had no idea the magnitude, the effort, the energy, the time, the sacrifice that he's placed, that he's put to bring all this stuff to light. I only pray that I maybe can live up to his example. His good works rise to almost the level of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. This resolution and his good works seek justice. And that's why I stand here before you. Also supporting this resolution, because this seeks justice. It's trying to make it right. There's proof. We urge and we pray that Congress and our national leaders will take heed and include our people in this. Right after I graduated from high school, back in 1993, and I'm dating myself, the French also conducted nuclear testing here on the island. I mean, in the Pacific. It's, I think it was down in Papaete in French Polynesia. The French were doing it, and I remember this because I posed the question to, I guess, then candidate Governor Gutierrez. I said, what are you going to do about it, What are we going to do about the French testing in and around the Pacific and the waters? It's just a consequence of being colonies. But these testings that the United States have conducted it's part of it's a different time, different place altogether, and I guess the country found it necessary, but this measure seems to, or this resolution is asking that although you did conduct these things, the consequences are apparent, and that there are people who have suffered because of the consequences, and we ask you to make them whole. And I thank the author of the resolution and this body, because I'm pretty sure, like Senator Jess Lujan says, it's going to win 15-0. And let's pass this resolution and get it to Congress, and let's continue to fight and seek justice. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator San Nicolas. On the main motion, I have Senator Chris Barnett. Anyone else wishing to speak? Senator Blas, then Senator Brown, and then Senator Amanda. Senator Barnett, I'll recognize you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rise in support of this resolution. And again, I join all of my colleagues in commending Mr. Robert Celestial, who I don't need to remind anyone in this room was never elected to any public office to serve the people of Guam. Yet I believe that he has done more work than many people who have been elected to public office. And I consider it an honor to know him as a friend, and I thank him for these efforts. And I just remind my colleagues, at the time that Robert had first come out and discussed these issues, there were many in our community who weren't so quick to support it. And as the good author from Jotnia spoke on the resolution, it kind of took me back to when I was much younger. So some of the names that she was mentioning, and these are the giants of the legislature. Former Speaker Mark Forbes, who I was very lucky to spend a lot of time. We used to go and visit him at his office. Defunto Onget Santos, right? Former Speaker Tony Pinco, I mean, if there was a Mount Rushmore of all the great senators who have come through this hall, I'm pretty sure many of the names mentioned by Speaker Terlahi would be carved on this mountain. And I always felt very inspired in the unity that we saw when you had, Republicans and Democrats speaking with one voice to the federal government to talk about the many injustices that the people of Guam have suffered at the hands of the administering power. And I don't need to go down the list. I'm sure we're all familiar with these injustices, but I will go down the list. The land takings, which we are still trying to remedy here in 2024. Agent Orange use on our island, which was again denied by the federal government. PCB contamination in Maleso at the Cocos Lagoon. The dumping of mustard gas in Mongmong Totumaiti. And many others, to include the measure before us today. And as my good colleague from Tamuning had spoke, he had joked that we've sent so many of these resolutions to Congress. 10 legislatures have spoke on this and supported this. And it just breaks my heart because when it's us, when it's the Chamorro people, who's the first one to the fight? Per capita. It's our people. And so it breaks my heart when the federal government is so slow to act and just seems ignorant of the plight of our people. And I wanted to read from this resolution. It was briefly mentioned by the author, retired U.S. Navy Lieutenant Charles Burt Schreiber, and this is his testimony relative to the radiation exposure that Guam endured. The resolution reads, on the fallout of the first hydrogen bomb test, the detonation of Operation Ivy's Mike, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Charles Schreiber states, I was the radiological safety officer for the Headquarters Command Guam. On or about November 3rd, 1952, I was making my monthly check sitting at the desk in that office that was about 5 feet from the window screens that covered the wall all the way down to a couple of inches from the floor. I took out the metal calibration rod from the Geiger counter, about as big as a normal soda straw and about 6 inches long, stored in the instrument. It has a small radioactive source on its end. I put the counter on the low setting. It has 3 settings, low, medium, and high, and was ready to place the rod near the detection windows, but the dial needle was way over on the scale, and the audible signal was clicking like mad. Almost a continuous sound like constant static on a radio. My original thought was that the counter was malfunctioning. But when I raised it up and I put it nearer to the screen window, the dial needle swung even further over, and the sound increased still further. I then put it close to the screen near the floor, and the needle went off the scale as far as it could swing right. I knew it was not the counter, but that there was some radioactivity outside. I panicked. My first thought was that Guam had been subjected to some radioactive dust attack. And although Lieutenant Schreiber testified to this truth was covered up for decades. And it wasn't until the documents were declassified in 1994. And not even then, because it took the good work of Mr. Robert Celestial pouring through mountains and mountains of documents. And mind you, this is before high-speed internet. And just go on and read this section here. The Guam Legislature supports the extension of RICA coverage, of course, to claimants who are residents of Guam for at least 1 year from 1946 to 1962 and diagnosed with RICA-covered illnesses as downwinders of the U.S. Pacific test sites. And the cancers, the diagnosis eligible under RECA include leukemia, multiple myeloma, lymphoma, primary cancers of the thyroid, male or female breast, esophagus, stomach, pharynx, small intestine, pancreas, bile ducts. And as I look at the years of coverage, claimants who were residents of Guam for at least 1 year from 1946 to 1962, that's so many of our people. That includes two of my mother's sisters. My Auntie Jeannie, my mother's youngest sister. She thought she had vertigo. She went to the doctor. They said, oh, you have vertigo, because you know when she stood up, she got dizzy. Went to the doctor again. I said, oh, it's vertigo. Third time. Oh, we found something. And you know, when we talk about our people having to move off island because they can't afford the medical care here, you know where they're moving to? They're moving to the states that have free medical care. And so my mother's youngest sister moved to the States, and 7 months later, she was gone. And my mom was in the room with her, and she told me when Auntie Jeannie left, she was scared. And my mother's youngest sister's death came just 5 years after another sister of my mother had passed, also from cancer. And so when we know these truths, and we know the history of the sins that have been committed against the people of Guam by the federal government, don't forget, you know, and look where we are today. We have gone from our great leaders uniting to speak in unison with one voice to the federal government. The greats like Speaker Forbes, Speaker Ampinco, of course, Defunto Anget Santos, uniting together. And what do we have here in 2023 and 2024? What I have witnessed in my short time as a senator here in the Guam Legislature is the unfortunate dividing of our people, where we can no longer stand united for great causes like this. When we discuss the selection of a new hospital site, and we ask questions about the lease, we ask questions about the arrangements with the federal government that were being treated like it was classified information. What was the response? I need not remind my colleagues that the response was that we were anti-military, we were anti-American, we were obstructionist. And that name-calling is still going on today. And that's really what breaks my heart, is if we have lost the ability to speak united as one on facts that have been established as basic truths, undeniable. If those facts are now contentious issues that divide us, that lead to the highest elected officials on our island calling out their own people for simply asking the questions and taking the stances that those great leaders who have come before us never hesitated to take. That's why I ran for senator. Because I wanted to come in here and I wanted to stand up for our people. And it's unfortunate that nowadays when we stand up for our people, there are many of our own who fall all over themselves trying to push us back down. And so for me, there's much to learn from RECA. There's much to learn from the unjust land takings. And these are lessons that, 50, 60, 70, 80 years later, we're struggling to learn. And so knowing that the federal government has hidden these atrocious acts from our people, that they have only come clean after tedious and tireless efforts by individuals like Mr. Celestial, let us not forget, moving forward, that we have a duty to ask the questions. We have a duty to our people to stand united in the face of the federal government and look Uncle Sam in the eye. Not approach him with our hat in our hand and our head down, but to look him in the eye and ask him to include us. To include us in this effort that includes so many others. In fact, it was the previous speaker who said this effort has included people who weren't even from our island, who came here and were stationed here and left. And what about our people? Afamon, you know? And so I think just in closing, I want to just remind my colleagues that, again, we have to be united from the governor, lieutenant governor, our delegate, down to the legislature when we approach the federal government and we're seeking justice in these efforts. Because divide and conquer is not a cliche for nothing. And it's unfortunate when we're doing it to ourselves. So I rise in support, and I anticipate, I'm very encouraged by the unanimous passage of this resolution. And I implore the other elected officials who represent our people outside of this legislative hall to do the same and to help push this effort through and get it heard on the ears of the candidates who are running for president on both sides. And I think it's encouraging that we have great support for this measure, again, on both sides of the aisle. And so thank you, Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on the resolution.
You're very welcome. Buen Pobetsu, Senator Barnett. Minority Leader, Senator Frank Blush, you are recognized on the main resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and stand in support of this resolution. I want to thank the author, primary author of this resolution, for providing me the opportunity to co-sponsor this. You know, the retiring speaker is right. But I think that one of the things that I've seen in many years is that while we may have some stark, sometimes nasty differences with regards to policy, there are certain things that we stand in unison. And I'm as an island, as leaders, and I'm hoping, I pray just as much as he does, that this is one of those areas that we continue to stand in unison for, but we also use this as an opportunity to look at other areas that we can stand in unison for and move forward. You know, as reading through the resolution and all the points that it makes, I'm reminded of the many times that we had to tell this story. And I don't know, the unfortunate thing is that many more times that we're going to have to continue to tell this story until something is done. Because it's opportune, as hopeful as I am that we can finally get some resolution, it's marred with the skepticism and unfortunate reality that this may not be the last time we're going to have to bring this up. But I also looked and reading the document, noticed something here. And I noticed it also in the testimony provided by the previous speakers. And if given the opportunity by almost everybody in this room, to include the legal counsel, the clerks, sergeant at arms, the pages. And it's kind of interesting that the genesis for this comes down to testing weapons that could be used in time of war. It's comes as a result of radiation that was leaked into the air from apparatuses that were being tested to be used, and hopefully never to be used in war, but it's there. If I was to ask in this room of how many of us in here have members or have they themselves served in the military, everybody's hand would go up. Because one of the things that we've been very proud of seeing is that we are loyal, we are patriotic, we stand and defend our country. And we have no qualms about it. In fact, we appreciate it. We're proud of that. And then if I was to ask another question of how many of us in here have or have been experienced or have experienced cancer in our families or in ourselves, I'm sure that every one of us would raise our hands too. So, you know, I don't know whether you want to call it irony, an oxymoron, or whatever. But my analysis or my thought on this is that for a community, for an island, for a body who have not only served proudly, but have stood with a family member who had served proudly or continues to serve proudly. We're also an island that is suffering as a result of being the most powerful nation in the world, military nation in the world. As a consequence to their radiation testing, as a consequence to their testing of their bombs. Then to add on to it is now the responsibility that our island and our people are being asked. We haven't been asked, actually. We've been told that we're going to be the tip of the spear. But you know what? We'll gladly take on that responsibility. But there's going to come a time when enough is enough. Then when we got, look, you've asked on to take on these roles. We've served you proudly. We continue to serve you proudly. We've helped you to clean up your mess. And what we're asking is just for you to acknowledge that the mess is being, you made a mess. You know, I listened intently to the retiring speaker about the plight of his aunt. You know what I'm sure that he probably didn't tell you is that when she went off island for that medical care and that she got for free, she probably got it for free because of the kind of work, kind of aid that state was getting for situations such as this. Why do our people have to go places off island to be able to get the care for free that they can't get here? And it takes me down to a road where it may not have anything to do with this resolution, but I'm sure there's going to be some faction or some group or some organization on this side. I'm not going to say it, okay? Somewhere down the road that they're going to use what we've just said or what we've just testified to, saying, see, that's why we need a new hospital in this place. I regress. I'll go back to this. I'm not going to use that as the opportunity. I'll save it for another day. But, you know, Madam Speaker, I remember years back, I was a co-sponsor to same type of resolution addressed to some of the same people asking for the same help. And hopefully that one day, closer to today than next year, the next time we're going to have to put something together like this, that these issues do get resolved and that our people are recognized. And in closing, I want to thank the many people who have stood stern and have been the foundation to this continuing effort, this never-ending effort, this effort that will hopefully one day will see the light. People like Mr. Robert Celestial. You know, it's because of people like him that people like us should be grateful for. And while this resolution is a testimony, a testament to the plight of our people, it's also a testament to the tenacity, to the perseverance, and to the promise that Mr. Celestial had made for his people. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the honor to be a co-sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Celestial, for continuing to put on the fight. And thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to be able to speak in behalf and in support of this resolution. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Minority Leader Senator Blas. On the main resolution, I'll address Senator Joanne Brown on the main resolution.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly echo the comments of all our colleagues this morning who have spoken in favor of Resolution 171. You know, and when we think about this issue, you know, it's hard to believe on a beautiful day like today I woke up this morning, I went outside and I looked at Pago Bay, as you get to, Madam Speaker, in the morning, and you can't think, how could something so terrible happen to our people? Something that causes so much pain, so much suffering, and so much loss. Because you always wonder, you know, when you have a loved one that dies of an illness such as cancer, what more life could have been lived? What more moments could we have shared together? What more memories could we have made? You know, as we look at our history, and yes, you know, we love the United States of America, and at the other end, we see, you know, the adverse challenges of our relationship, because it's something that's so fundamental to who we are. I mean, our health, our life, and the impacts that some of these decisions that have been made in the past, so many years later, affect the health and well-being of our people. And I agree with our previous speaker. I mean, who here has not experienced in their immediate, if not themselves, within their immediate circle of their family, a family member, a blood relative who has died of cancer, who has suffered with cancer? Because I'll tell you, for those that I've dealt with, once you have it, you always fear. Even if you get through those 5 years, you do all the right things you're supposed to do that your doctor tells you, you always wonder, is it going to come back? Is my life going to be cut short because of this? You know, we see and we hear about the testing that happened to our neighbors in the Marshall Islands, and certainly the issues that they themselves, their children, their descendants are experiencing as a result of this testing that happened all those years ago. And then here we are, all these many miles away, and this is something, obviously, this is one of the things, of course, when our federal government is not forthcoming, was not forthcoming. And when these decisions got made that put our people in the situation that we have been in. And yet we think that, you know, our patriotism, our love for America, the fact that, you know, so many of our own are the first to stand in line to defend the principles of freedom, love, liberty, right? The pursuit of happiness. And yet our patriotism, unfortunately, you know, it's not something that's been rewarded. Because, you know, for all the material things you can have in life, and certainly we are a generation that has more material things than our parents, certainly our grandparents' generation. I mean, we think we have it hard. We're cruising in our air-conditioned cars and our air-conditioned homes, and we get to go shop. How many pairs of shoes do we need? How many shirts do we need? My goodness. I could count how many pairs of pants my grandfather had, how many hats. He had one. My inheritance, I still have that hat. You know, we have all these things, but we know that without our health, without our well-being, we have nothing. You know, for 14 years, I sat on the Restoration Advisory Board for Andersen Air Force Base. And it was one of the first times the military actually allowed the engagement of members from our public to sit and be involved and engaged in decision-making with regards to how do we address cleanup of these contaminated sites that were related to the military dumping. And as I've said often, if we were to take a pin and put it on parts of the island, you know, we'd have a lot of pins on that island, the island of Guam, because there's been so many areas where, certainly in some successful in cleanup, others, we call it mitigation, areas that we cannot clean up because the type of contaminants that are there might not be readily accessible, or the cost and technology is not there yet to properly clean it. And so these sites require extensive monitoring. When you talk about monitoring that's going to go 30, 40, 50 plus years into the future, because they are not able to clean it up at this time. The percentage is just too high for such a small population. We all know that. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. And you fear, of course, Madam Speaker, is this something our children, is something our descendants are going to be impacted by? What are we passing on to them because of what we've experienced or what our parents experienced? So much suffering, because decisions got made far beyond our reach or ability to influence that impacts us all these years later. Certainly commend our speaker for introducing this, and yes, we talk about our other former colleagues that I've had the opportunity to serve with, and some of us have had the opportunity to serve with those good senators. And Robert Celestial. You know, we remember, Madam Speaker, all those years ago in the other legislative building. Gosh, I think it's been like 23, 24 years. You know, he was like the Lone Ranger, and he'd come regularly, every opportunity that he had to engage with us as policymakers to bring up this reality because of his own experience in the military and what he saw and what he experienced. And said, wait a minute, oh my gosh, there's a connection not just to what happened in the Marshall Islands, but this is something that affected our people right here on Guam. And yes, we recognize and commend him. I mean, how many people do you see have that kind of grit, that kind of dedication, especially all these years later? He was definitely a man on a mission. And it's a mission that we all should be grateful for. We certainly want to see the passage of this legislation in Congress. We know so much work and effort has been put in. And certainly by Mr. Celestial himself, the members of his team, and the radiation survivors that continue to fight and advocate. You know, Senator Tello mentioned it's not ultimately about the money, and it's true. You know, it takes a while for you to realize you can have all the material things in the world, but if you don't have your health and you don't have your well-being, you have nothing. All this we will leave behind. I certainly hope the opportunity is there for those that have suffered during this time. I was not here in 1962. My parents were. My dad was still in the Navy, still a young sailor. He talks of his adventures here. He's not with us. He also died of cancer. We certainly send our support on this resolution and want to see its passage. And ultimately, as it was with the war reparations, again, another issue, another challenge for our people, that something our people had to take the initiative to address. And sadly, many of those that needed the support and help then, needed the money then to rebuild their lives after the war, did not live to see that day. Both my grandparents passed away long before they would ever have had the opportunity to see any benefits from that. And also, how many of our people already have passed away that were affected by this fallout of nuclear radiation that reached our island? Many. How many are suffering today? Many. So I certainly appreciate the efforts of our speaker, all those, Mr. Celestial, all those that have come forth to advocate, to speak for our people, to stand up and say, hey, we count, we matter. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on this resolution.
You're very welcome, Senator Joanne Brown. Anyone else on the main motion? I'll recognize Legislative Secretary, Senator Amanda Shelton, on the main motion.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution. As a co-sponsor, I want to thank the author, of course, for introducing this resolution on behalf of the body. And it really speaks to the inclusivity that is so central to much of the political debate and policymaking that's going on today in Washington, in state capitals, in communities that are large and small across the U.S., and especially right here on Guam. For far too long, the concerns of the people of Guam, as downwinders of the testing of nuclear weapons in the Pacific, have been ignored. We've heard today in this session hall how many resolutions have been introduced, how many senators who came before us who have been fighting this fight. And this resolution calls attention yet again and seeks to include the people of Guam in national legislation that is winding its way through the U.S. Congress. And we in this body are not only representatives of the people that elected us, we're also stewards of the land, stewards of the water, and most importantly, stewards of our culture and our traditions that have shaped generations and generations of our indigenous people that call this island home. And it doesn't matter to us how long ago this testing took place. It only matters that the people of Guam are included in the right and just efforts to correct what happened in the past. The people who came to support Resolution 171 when the public hearing was held have committed themselves year after year, resolution after resolution, to this cause. Mr. Robert Celestial, which all of us here commend and have worked with, the PARS organization, their unwavering, tireless commitment to bringing recognition and compensation to the people of Guam who have suffered, and refusing to give up, refusing to take no for an answer. I was reading through the list of cancers included in RICA, and just like every one of our colleagues here, Madam Speaker, almost every single one of those cancers, I can name a family member or close friend who has been diagnosed, suffered, died. And that is something that not only we here in the body feel, but every family in our community, every family throughout the island. And it's with more than a little irony that just a week ago, if anyone was watching the award shows in the United States, the 96 Oscars, and the 96th annual Oscars, the movie Oppenheimer walked away with every big award: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and many others. A movie about the Manhattan Project developing atomic bombs. And now we're here discussing including Guam in compensation for the acts of a nuclear arms race released on our island and the Pacific region. This is the time for the United States to do the best for Guam and for all the Pacific Islands who were downwind for years and years of testing as a result of these bombs. And I know that we're going to pass this bill unanimously without dissent. And this resolution, the inclusion of Guam in RICA, will be more meaningful to folks like Robert Celestial, the PARS organization, all of our family members and friends who have suffered from cancer and other diseases, will be much more meaningful than any Oscar or award, this actual recognition and compensation. So again, I thank the author, thank all the individuals who have put their heart and soul into this cause for many years, and to our body for continuing this fight. Siduos Masi, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Legislative Secretary Shelton. Anyone else on the main motion on the resolution? If not, Speaker Therese, you may close on the resolution.
Siduos Masi, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues who spoke on this measure. This is exactly what we need to do here on Guam, and is to add our voices to the efforts that are being made in Congress and being made on the front lines every day. And I'm very grateful for all of your your continued work. Many of you have been in this body much longer than I have and continue to advocate for this as well. I just want to, first of all, remind everyone that when those documents were unclassified and Mr. Celestial brought that evidence out to the public, took it to Congress, took it to the Energy Department, he was questioned about the source of his documents, and later, according to his testimony to us, later on found that those documents were then declassified again. I'm sorry, classified again. And that's why this pursuit is really become a pursuit of two things that people have been united on in this pursuit. That is, it's a pursuit, of course, against injustice, but it's also unity of love for each other, love for our families and our people who have suffered tremendously from cancers. So Mr. Celestial told us that this pursuit began for him in the 90s when he discovered those documents around 1994. The legislature, our Congress representatives from Guam have been active in the records we can find since at least 2004. This pursuit is in addition to the pursuit across the nation to be recognized for the same thing that Congress has already in statute recognized, that while they were testing their nuclear ammunition, they hurt their own citizens, their own residents, and that is what has happened. They've recognized that, but they only limited it to certain places. And now that the evidence has come forward, many of these places, just like Guam, is demanding expansion of that exact same coverage, the same findings, to the places where it should have applied since the first day. So for Guam, this is to those residents who were here from 1946 to 1962, who have suffered from one of those cancers that is listed to be cancers resulting from exposure to radiation. This is a lesson. I agree with one of the previous speakers. A lesson to all of us, this pursuit. It has taken over 2 decades. That's a lot of work, a lot of no's, and truly, for me, it's a testament to the courage and the perseverance and the love of these people like Mr. Celestial, Pars. They do it for love, or they would have quit a long time ago, because advocating in the face of no is not easy. But advocating against injustice and against suffering of your people and for the love of your people, it has united us. It has united us for 2 decades, at least. And that's the lesson. Not just because each and every one of our families has suffered cancer, but because they continue to deny that the potential responsibility. They continue to deny that it might even be true. But on top of that, our people who are suffering are not getting help. Cancer has affected all of our families. 7 of the top 10 cancers on Guam are those found to be caused by radiation exposure. Imagine this. We're talking about the period from 1946 to 1962. By 1944, our people, many of them had died in World War II. Some had survived the war after lots of suffering, brutality, starvation, and concentration camps. Exposures to bombing and toxic pesticides and other contamination. To this day, some of that contamination is denied. We've had to fight, like previous speakers have pointed out. On top of that, massive land takings, resettlements, meaning they took the Chamorro people and moved them around and told them, you can no longer live here, you live here. Not just once, but over and over again. And then from 1946 to 1962, on top of all of that, the nuclear testing that Guam was downwind to. PARS is the group that Robert and his friends formed, the Pacific Association of Radiation Survivors. Together, they have shown us the strength of unity against injustice, unity in love, unity, perseverance, not just for their individual family members. None of them did it for that. I'm sure they were inspired, like we all are, by that. But Mr. Celestial doesn't even do this for himself. They did it for all of the people of Guam, all of those who should be eligible to claim. All of our cancer patients. We've lost so many who did not receive an ounce of support from the government that may have caused the cancer. Many came to testify. I wanted to read their names. They were here in support. So many we have lost. Dr. Paris, for example, but his daughter came, Callan Paris, Frank Camacho, Bertha Duenas, Carrie Iglesias, Vicky Mesa, Albert Perez, Gloria Perez, Angela Santos, Muñeca Flores, Lourdes Mendiola, Clifford Wooten, W. Mears, Marissa Mears, Janet St. Dolores Taitingfong. She's one of the founders with her husband, Antonio Taitingfong of PARS. Linda Perez, Anna Mae Crisostomo, Dolores Babauta, Carlos LaGuardia, Ronald LaGuardia. Sidus Masi, to you for coming to this hearing and testifying. Sidus Masi to all of those residents of Guam who for decades have added their names to petitions, added their names to testimonies, sent in letters, testified at public hearings for 2 decades. This is a testament, and Sidus Masi to my colleagues for their unity on this matter. This is a testament. This effort, this monumental effort by Mr. Celestial, showing resourcefulness, hard work. I'm still so amazed at what they were able to find and prove. But that never stopped. The advocacy, the relationship building, the one-on-one convincing, all of it. It never stopped. Sidzu's ma'asi to all of those who made that effort. I really believe it is a testament to friendships that they developed with people who have been instrumental. But it's also a testament to Chamorros, to their resourcefulness, hard work, courage, and perseverance. And Mr. Celestial is very optimistic, and his optimism is very contagious. And we're so very encouraged by what happened in the Senate. And we are not going to give up. We are going to fight for this. He has fought for this. They have fought for this before us. And the people of Guam, we want justice. We want to alleviate the suffering of those who are suffering from cancer. That's what we want. And we can get this through inclusion of Guam in the radiation exposure compensation program that Congress established, that the Department of Justice administers, that has been paying out claims and taking care of people who are suffering from cancers across the nation. So I just want to say again, Sidzu's Masi to all of you, Sidzu's Masi, Mr. Celestial, Sidzu's Masi to the people of Guam who have stood up for this and inspired all of us for decades. And I'm optimistic as well that with the work that all of them have done, that we are going to see success in this term of Congress. Sidzu's Masi, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
And I renew my motion to place this resolution on the third reading as amended.
On that motion.
I'm sorry, may I add some sponsors?
Yes, please.
I'd like to add Senator Tello Taitagui, Senator Duenas, Senator Fisher, Senator Parkinson, and Senator Kanata. I think that's everyone. If it's not everyone, if the clerk could add everyone. Sidzu's Masi, ma'am.
I'll take that as a full motion, Madam Speaker. And on that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Majority Leader? Yes. Madam Speaker, I apologize. That was on the sponsorship, so on the motion to place.
I renew my motion to place the resolution as amended onto the third reading.
On that motion, seeing or hearing no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader, thank you very much. You are recognized.
Sidzu's Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to recess until 2 p.m. this afternoon.
On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. We are in recess till this afternoon at 2.